This game I'm working on is starting to gain some momentum. Up until now, I've been extremely focused on fine-tuning the gameplay and building the foundation for what I build the rest of the game on. I'm now in a place where I can start working on more content, actual levels and things to do, rather than just mechanics. This past month I've been working on this Dungeon in the Sky level, and I love how it turned out. I made some music for it too, which is playing now. There's an electric theme to it, with several new enemies. These cloud guys shoot shock balls that sort of home in on the player, so it's a little harder to avoid. There's these sentries, which are really dangerous if you get too close, but since the dodge roll gives you iframes, that's probably the safest way you can get around these. And there's also the jellyfish, which are electrified and shock you if you try to hit them. They're also the first enemies with their own light source. Once you play the game, you might find that these jellyfish have some other unique mechanics attached to them. One of the key effects of the sky area is the background. The clouds have a parallax effect as they move and the camera moves. I'm going to be utilizing this type of effect a lot in this game. Actually, this isn't even the first case of me doing this. The main menu has the same thing with the different layers of clouds. The code for how I did this is open source, by the way. It's ripped straight from a game that I made about 5 years ago, and that whole game is on Github. I also made some moving platforms for this dungeon, which is a first for this game. It might seem like an obvious and easy thing to have in a game, but keep in mind that most of this game's movement is manually programmed, so there's no logic that automatically makes a platform work like this. The way I made this work is cool though, and it probably works for any game engine. The platform stores two different XY positions, the platform's current position on this frame, and the platform's previous position from the previous frame. Keep in mind that the game is running at around 60 frames per second, so these values are constantly changing really fast as the platform moves. With these values being updated every frame, we're now able to calculate if the player needs to be moved with the platform. If the player is on the platform, or in other words, their position is within the bounds of the platform box, then that means that we'll want the player to move with the platform's movement. And this is where those stored frame position values come in. If we have the previous frame and the current frame's position, then we know exactly how far the platform moved within that time, and we also know which direction. So we can simply say, if the player is on the platform, change the player's position by that same amount for that frame. This is going to be a very small distance, but since this is happening 60 times every second, and this distance matches the distance of the platform's movement, you end up with perfect and smooth movement all around. Just be careful not to fall off. As you're exploring this dungeon, there's going to be a bunch of items to find, and to give more variety to the loot, I added these color dyes. I haven't talked about this for a while, but you can customize the player's cloak color in the menu with a few options that I have supported. And the way this works is you'll start with only the red color, but throughout the game you'll find more dyes. Once you find a color dye, you'll permanently unlock that color, and you can try it out to see if you like it. There's been some discussion on Discord about potentially attaching abilities to the different cloaks, like an orange cloak, which gives you heat resistance, or blue lets you swim faster, but I've decided not to do this. I'd rather let people play the game with whatever color they like the best, rather than incentivizing them to use certain colors over others just because there's some small benefit. I'm sure people will disagree with me on that, but I'm open to opinions either way. Like all good dungeons, it ends with a boss fight. The pixel art for this boss was made by TrisPixels, and I love how this turned out. I made some music for this fight as well. Here's a short preview of everything. I'd like to add a bit more variety to the fight, but overall I think it's looking great. The arena was easy to make too. It has a green glow to it, same with the clouds in the background, but I just wrote a simple shader that shifts the hue around a bit and brightens things up to give it that neon green glow that I'm looking for. The reward for beating this boss is unfortunately an ability I've already shown on this channel, but it's one that was always intended to be unlocked here. The lightning spell hits all nearby enemies and it recharges over time, so you have every incentive to cast it whenever you can. I think having this ability will shake up the combat quite a bit, because you might have noticed that the boss fight didn't have too much strategy. The player only really could use the sword to deal damage, which being an early boss, this makes sense. I'm eager to see the level of challenge and complexity increase over time in this game though, and I'm becoming more optimistic that this game will end up being a ton of fun to play with all the new abilities and updates I have planned. There's a demo in the description if you'd like to try out the current version, and I really appreciate any feedback on Discord, or if you'd just like to stop in and say hi. Thanks so much for watching.